Hello and welcome back to 5-ish minute reviews. Well, let's go ahead and get right into it. I don't really have a need to ramble. So here we are. Here's the first one, and this was kind of a curiosity. This is the CRKT Trask, which was kind of interesting. This is probably one of the cheapest knives that uses their Deadbolt Lock system that I was interested in checking out. But this also has D2 blade steel on it instead of their normal 7CR or 8CR that they tend to use on most of their ridiculously affordable knives. But yeah, most of it was me being curious about this Deadbolt Lock here, and it's interesting. This thing has an incredibly robust blade geometry on this thing. Decent for some harder use tasks. This is not a slicing knife at all. It really doesn't feel all that great for it. I did reprofile it to 17 degrees per side, and the shoulders are fairly high on it as a result of that, because of the thicker geometry. And it's also a basically a saber grind, so that ends up adding more to the thickness on it here. The ergonomics on it aren't bad. It's dying for some jimping up top here, and it's got none, unfortunately. The plunge grind on it's all right, because you can kind of sneak up a little bit. To me, it's either designed for someone with way smaller fingers or really not actually designed for choking up, because that just digs right in there on my finger, and that's kind of pointy on it. Yeah, we got a little anodized aluminum back spacer on it. The pocket clip, which would have been kind of nice to swap over to either side. It ends up working out okay, but it's not inset into the liners, and it's got some button top screws on it, so it is a little bit difficult to get into and out of the pocket. The other thing that I have noticed on this guy here is kind of the way that the deadbolt system ends up working, which is a little unfortunate. Let's see if I can't get a good view of essentially what's going on. Yeah, we can, let's see. Get me a little bit of a flashlight there. Essentially, it does have a little bit in there that is a part of the liner that is acting as the detent on this guy. So when it's staying closed, it is actually using a detent there. And it's really strong. We can see this is way not on center. And it takes quite a bit of force to push it to be kind of on center. Nothing I did to this knife would get it to come back to center. There's just way too much force pushing on there. And it's not a very long piece that's actually bent there, so it's actually a little bit more challenging than a lot of other liner locks or something like that to end up adjusting that. So you just kind of have to deal with the fact that it's always going to be off center. That thumb hole ends up working out all right, because I have this thing, it's actually way too loose on it, unfortunately, at the moment, but it's also fairly annoyingly difficult to adjust that tension on there. But yeah, you can kind of push it closed, but only if it's really, really loose like this. If you want to adjust the tension on the thing, essentially we got this Torx screw. I'm going to pull that out, and this whole plate comes off with a spring, and then that will allow the deadbolt port here, which has 2 prongs in there, to come out. And then there's a little tiny piece in there that you can use a very, very shallow and specific flathead screw to be able to adjust the pivot tension on it. And then you got to put that back on and then hold it in place while you screw that back on. It's kind of maddening, unfortunately. That and the handle scales, they definitely feel super cheap. They are, yeah, they are GRN, or so glass-filled nylon. Some people will refer to it as FRN for fiberglass reinforced nylon. They basically act about the same, but I suppose they are a little bit different materials. But they are essentially kind of hollow, as they are ejected molded. But then they sit on top of these liners here, so it does feel a little bit more hollow than it probably could have if they'd either not had the pockets in there on the inside, or if they were the liners were inset onto them. It would probably make it feel a lot more like a Spyderco or something like that. But yeah, I was interested in how the deadbolt mechanism works, and it's interesting, but at least as how it's implemented here with the side of the liner actually making that detent, and it's way too strong. Not my favorite. Maybe it is a little bit better on some of the really, really expensive ones like the Homeland or something like that they've done with that. But this one, not my favorite. Let's talk about some blade stats. We got 3.29 inches, 83.6 millimeters. It is a D2 blade. We got 3.4 millimeter blade stock thickness, which is probably thicker than it needed to be. And then with the saber grind and then the robust grind after that. Not super slicey. 4.43 ounces, or 125.5 grams. Maybe a little bit heavier than it might need to be, but I think a lot of that's probably, excuse me, the blade on there. And the handle on this guy is 0.58 of an inch thick. That's 14.7 millimeters. Which doesn't bother me all that much, but is probably a little thicker than some folks probably want. But still, like I said, the ergonomics on it are fairly decent. It's just, you know, the cutting performance and kind of the implementation of the deadbolt lock that I'm not a huge fan of. There we go. Next up, this guy is putting a smile on my face. This is a new CJRB. It's called the Resource. It's a Dirk Pinkerton design. And, yeah, absolutely looks like a Dirk Pinkerton design. Quite a bit. Yeah, reminds me quite a bit of the Kaiser Escort. Very, very similar as far as blade size or blade shape and all that sort of stuff there. But this thing is huge. The blade is 4.16 inches long. I think it's stated on the website as 4.18, but yeah, I still get from the edge of the scale out there to 4.16. This is using AR RPM 9 blade steel, which is great to see. Really, really comfortable handle. It's G10. It's the only variants they have are different colors of G10. And I think gray and tan didn't have a coated blade, but the red one like this and blue did have a black blade and hardware on it. So I went with that, and it might hurt the action on it just a little tiny bit, but it's not bad overall. But yeah, this thing is quite nice and comfortable. It is very, very large. It's got a decent blade grind on there. This isn't going to be a crazy laser beam. However, it's much more capable for hybrid cutting than like this Trask was. You know, just, I mean, it's got a higher blade on it, or, you know, taller blade, essentially. But yeah, this thing ends up working out quite well. The plunge grind on it wasn't the greatest. We can already see that I did create a bit of a smile there, and I was trying my best not to. We also have a nice swedge on both sides, so you can reverse flick that, or if you didn't want to slow roll that open with the thumb stud, you can do that with the fuller on it as well. That's all sorts of good stuff. Interesting that the back spacers and that stop pin aren't black hardware, but everything else is. Not that I think that really makes much of a difference, but I suppose if someone was actually a stickler for, absolutely everything being blacked out on it, well, that one didn't quite make the cut for it. We got some nice thumb crenellations there, decently sharp, not cut you sharp, but definitely grabs the thumb, so that's all sorts of great. We have some lock bar cut out here. The lock bar tension, even though this is a liner lock, is actually really strong on this one, at least for mine. It still doesn't force it over way too far as far as the lockup is concerned, but it does take a bit more force to close this than I'm used to with most other liner locks. The action on it's pretty decent. It's not going to be a full crazy drop shot, but it's a nice wiggle shot. That might be different if you don't have a coated blade on here. Pocket clip isn't deep carry, but still, it's nice and comfortable. And there's not a whole lot that's sticking out from it. But yeah, this thing is fairly low profile in the clip, so it's pretty darn comfortable. I don't really get anything of a crazy hot spot out of this thing that I might otherwise get from a folded over deep carry clip there. I wouldn't mind if the pocket clips on these guys, once they come back up, they flatten out a little bit more like Spyderco's, but that's just kind of a nitpick. This is just a super fun knife. This thing would make an absolutely wonderful beater knife too, especially, with it having that powder metallurgy steel, stainless with about the edge retention capabilities of D2, but a little bit tougher. Yeah, there's not a whole lot to really complain about with this guy. It's just a whole lot of fun for, the, 55 or 60 bucks that I think this thing ended up costing. It was some good stuff. I keep forgetting to do the rest of these specs and everything here. So, yeah, I said 4.16 inch blade, or 105.7 millimeters. It's a 3.1 millimeter blade stock thickness on here, which is just about right, I think. This is another heavy one, 6.13 ounces, or 173.5 grams. We don't really have much in the way of skeletonization at all done to the liners, which probably could have changed the weight down a little bit, but it also could have changed the balance point on it a little bit too. So that could be a reason why they didn't. Also, it does have some kind of contouring there, but we do have peel ply texture up at the top there. That will maybe wear your pockets down just a little tiny bit, but this is nowhere near Emerson or Cold Steel kind of aggressive. It's got some grip, but, just enough. Next up, we got this guy, which was another one that I was kind of interested in. This is the CRKT Slacker. This is a Ken Onion design. And this was another really, really cheap one. But this one has their field strip technology that I wanted to check out. And I'll demonstrate it here because it's very, very quick to end up doing. But we'll talk about the rest of it first. Let's go ahead and open it up. This thing it reminds me of a lot of kind of a Ken Onion's older work, as in not like really weird, crazy out there, but much more utilitarian sort of stuff. This knife on the blade does not state what kind of steel it uses. However, on the websites, it states that it's 1.4116. That is essentially the same thing as 4116, but usually the 1.4116 indicates that it was made in Japan from their particular facilities. Just part of the name of the steel and all that sort of stuff. It might not necessarily guarantee that it was, but more often than not, that's what it denotes. But same steel, just 4116, I think, is usually made in Germany, not Japan. There we go. We got a nice drop point, not a huge amount of belly to it. Unfortunately, this thing's geometry is not my favorite. This thing is really, really thick behind the edge. I reprofiled it to 20 degrees behind the edge. Or, just 20 degrees per side there, which is what I do with a lot of simpler steels and stuff like that. This thing still has quite the shoulder on it. And even so, this thing doesn't actually slice all that well, which is interesting because this knife isn't anywhere near large enough to warrant much thicker grinds to do particularly hard work with it. That, and we do have, this does have aluminum handles on it, which are all right. It's got a coating on it, makes it feel much more like plastic than if it wasn't coated. It's fine. It will hold up. But yeah, it kind of does have that feel of like the Boker Kalashnikov kind of painted aluminum there. But the liner lock, really serrated, and it sticks out quite a bit. It's actually a little uncomfortable to squeeze it quite a bit there. I do like where he placed the jimping on this, though. That's nice to have your thumb really far out there. And definitely a deep carry pocket clip on this guy here. You know, maybe just a little bit of it showing out there at the end. This guy is riding on, that's right, something I failed to mention here with the Trask is it's technically riding on bearings. Those bearings are incredibly tiny on this knife. And, you know, if you have any kind of correct lock bar tension or correct pivot tension and everything on there, this thing just basically feels like it's riding on some sort of washers. This one is. It's riding on nylon. But, yeah, overall, it was all right. This thing was also incredibly easy to reprofile, as 4116 should be. But, yeah, it's, the pièce de résistance for it is the field strip thing. So you flip that bar forward, then you roll this thing back. And as long as it actually lets go, then there we are. We got the that guy there. We can pull out that one. And we can see we have just kind of like this bolt sort of thing going on here, not just a circular piece. And that does part of that whole field strip stuff for it. So yeah, we can go ahead and do that. Essentially, the only thing that this does is turn this pivot a little bit so that it will offset it a little bit so that it, yeah. So we can get that in there, roll that back forward. You don't need to go crazy with that because otherwise it's really difficult to undo that again. But yeah, you end up doing that again, and there we go. So, real easy to take apart, but it's riding on nylon washers on it, so not a huge need to take this thing apart all that much. But still, I wanted to get a knife with the field strip technology to kind of check it out. This is, I think, the second gen of it, where the first one was done a little bit differently. Not quite sure. But yeah, this is an interesting knife, but I don't really think this was Ken Onion's best work. It's definitely not going to replace the leak by any stretch of the imagination here. All right. And of course, I pulled it off prematurely. 3.3-inch blade, 83.8 millimeters. It's 2.9 millimeter blade stock thickness. It's 2.6 ounces, though, so it's definitely under that ounce and inch mark. 73.5 grams. 0.48 of an inch, so just under half an inch thick. It's 12.1 millimeters. So, yeah. All right, next up here is Vosteed Morel, like the mushroom. Some people have some nitpicks on it. I do too, but yeah, let's go ahead and get into it here. This is an aluminum scale with some sort of coating on there. UA was not incredibly specific on exactly what kind of coating that it was on there. Supposedly ceramic had something to do with it, but it's not Cerakote. So that's probably a PVD of some sort, but not super specific on any of that. I got the one that was white, and yeah, it's a little off-white. Not quite tan, but kind of a dingy white. Not a brand new Hanes beefy tee, but maybe one that you've used on the job site for a couple of months and washed with some darker stuff. But yeah, this is kind of the Stormtrooper, but they also had some other fruity kind of colors to it. A lot of actual milling done on the actual handles here. Quite a few facets with a little bit of one cut in there, and yeah, we got their deep carry pocket clip with just a little tiny bit sticking out there. You can swap it over to the other side, so that's nice. This thing does not want to stay closed. And that's something that some people have kind of complained about, is the crossbar lock on it. Yeah, just detents not a whole lot on it. This one was... These models were produced before March of this year, which means that you can adjust the lock bar, or not the lock bar, the Omega spring tension on these guys. It does have the 3 holes for adjustability. Apparently, they stopped doing that on all their models that were produced at or after March of this year, or something like that. That's what one of their assistants, Shane, something with a D, had mentioned on Facebook a little while back about it. For me, this hole in the front here is really buried in there. Like, if I really do that, I can slow roll the thing open. It's much easier to do a reverse flick on it here. I have changed the lock bar tension by taking this thing apart, which was actually a nightmare. The problem is that the nested steel liners on the inside here had a really tight tolerance, and then we added the coating on top of the aluminum here. So these things are basically like wedged on after the fact. And because they're, inset and everything, I didn't really want to scratch anything, but I needed something strong enough to pry with. And all of my plastic spudgers, way too soft to end up doing that. But I ended up getting it off anyway. So yeah, I did kind of change the lock bar tension. That it had a lot. It required a heck of a lot to pull this thing back, which some of their others have done with their crossbar sort of things. But adjusting any of them did not change the detent or lack thereof. So that's, yeah, a little unfortunate. The blade itself, pretty interesting. It's we can definitely see RSK's work done here. This looks quite a bit like... shoot, now I don't quite remember the name of the model because I think it changed. I think it started out being the RS Chaos, and then changed to something else. But either way, same kind of dual grind sort of thing going on here. However, this one's using N690 blade steel. It's not my favorite. It's not terrible, not as bad as I used to make it out to be. But yeah, it's kind of right in that VG10, right around between VG10 and 154 cm, leaning further towards the VG10 sort of section on it, especially with the amount of cobalt and everything like that we got in there. I got mine reprofiled to 17 degrees because that's kind of what I felt like this thing could take. And the front portion, fine. The back portion looks a little silly. And the plunge grind, even though this does have a crossbar lock on it, incredibly poor. Yeah, I made this thing smart like the Joker. And there was just absolutely no getting around it, unfortunately. The other thing that some folks complain about is kind of this back area here being quite pointy. And it is, but for me, I don't really interact with that portion of it almost at all. Like if I'm holding it up here, it's not really coming into contact with my hand at all. It can, I suppose, a bit if I'm doing a pinch grip, but it's going to require a heck of a lot of force going in the opposite direction from, where it should be. A lot of folks have said that it ends up hurting them when they're trying to open it, and I suppose it can, but that's super uncomfortable for me to do for opening it up. And that doesn't end up bothering me when I'm using the centrifugal opening or the reverse flick. So yeah, I can see how some people have some problems with that, but for me in particular, with my larger hands, it doesn't really bother me all that much. So yeah, for me, not my favorite Vosteed, but still pretty interesting. Let's talk about some specs on it. We got 2.98 inch blade, or 75.6 millimeters. We got a 3 millimeter blade stock thickness, which is pretty much the only thing Vosteed has done so far. We got 3.43 ounces, or 97 grams. So it definitely feels solid. Doesn't feel chintzy in any way in particular. So that's all sorts of good. That would be 97 grams if I didn't say that. And 0.49 of an inch thick. So right around what you would get out of Spyderco PM2. Or 12.4 millimeters there. So not bad. Not a fan of the blade steel on it. It definitely takes a hit compared to like their 154 CM that they've used on some others. But still, pretty interesting. And, another newer model that'll be around for quite a while. They did call this a shilling cutter blade, which I'm not seeing. I'm seeing this as a modified sheep's foot. Shilling cutter for me means the blade needs to be down canted so that it helps gather material into the blade as you're doing a pull cut. And this maybe at a very, very bare minimum, but nah, man, this is a modified sheep's foot. Alrighty, and the last one here, which, dang it, I'm still taking longer than I really should for these guys, is this one. This is TwoSun TS409. I just recently done a review on this guy. Not sure if it's going to be live on my channel before this comes out. Probably, but, we'll see overall. This is another Alfonso Alfaro design here. It's another button lock. Fairly similar to this guy, which is one of my favorite TwoSuns. This is a TS358, his first one here, D2 steel. Hey, look, I got number 11 on there. It does share that same pocket clip, which is nice because they're interchangeable, and you can go right or left hand or dominant or offhand carry. The button on this guy sticks out an incredible amount, a heck of a lot more than it does on this one here. Which is alright. I still don't really interact with it at all while I'm, even if I do have kind of a crazy hammer grip on this thing, it's not putting any pressure on it, so I don't really have any worries about that happening there. But I do have some problems. This thing had an incredible snaggle tooth, kind of what I call it when the blade, the exposed blade, is way too close to the top of the handle when it's closed enough that if you did that, you would have sliced your finger right the heck open. I ended up modifying it quite a bit, and because of that, we can see this thing is quite flat from here to here. It did have a full belly on it that I didn't quite feel like chomping off area up here to maintain that. But yeah, I took off quite a bit of length there, and then ended up cutting in a little bit more of a sharpening choil, so it actually still had a little bit of one. I had to use a Dremel tool here with a little carbide or tungsten carbide kind of cutter on there for it. But yeah, after doing those modifications and stuff like that, it's an okay knife. Actually, these kind of little milling things there actually end up being a little bit uncomfortable. They are a little bit sharp. They do add a bit of grip to it, but not in the best way possible. And then with this thing kicking up before the jumping up here, it's not all that comfortable because that's just right in the middle of my thumb, unfortunately. That, and it has some thumb studs, so that's going to be in part of the cutting path for you. It's an interesting knife. Looks kind of pretty, but man, I tell you, if this particular knife here, the TS358, if that jimping was done the way that this one was, with much more aggressive jimping, this thing would be just an immaculate knife. It's absolutely fantastic. Has so much grip from the milling that's been done there. Super comfortable and very neutral and stuff like that. This one is, I think it was a newer design. It came out quite a bit later. It just, to me, it doesn't quite hit all of those features. It's an alright knife, but it had a heck of a lot of flaws, unfortunately. I am still excited to see a lot more of what Keanu Alfonso is kind of got going on later on. He's done some great knives with TwoSun, but he's also now come out with the Bestech Good Boy, which a lot of people seem to be enjoying quite a bit. He's got one with Boker, I think it's kind of a smaller normal blade with some pretty decent blade steel, and has a utility blade kind of thing built into it that you can come out the backside. That looks pretty interesting. And I think he might have also had one from like Fox or something like that, which is also interesting. I mean, they're an Italian manufacturer. It wasn't one of their super high-end knives, and I might have been seeing the wrong logo on there, but I think it was from him. But still, yeah, a pretty darn good knife designer overall. But just this one in particular, not my favorite. But there we go. There's the TS409. We got 3.87-inch blade on there, or 98.2 millimeters, so quite long. 3.8 millimeter blade stock thickness. That's part of the reason why it's kind of dangerous, because it's wider up here for you to get more of your finger meat in there. 5.82 ounces, or 165 grams, so fairly weighty, even though they've taken out a lot of the titanium on the inside there. 165 grams, if I didn't say that, and 0.62, so of an inch thick, so quite thick in the handle there. 15.8 millimeters. But alrighty, yep, that's the TS409. We got the Vosteed Morel. We got the CRKT Slacker. We got the CJRB Resource, and the CRKT Trask here. Both of these guys, I wish they were better, but I was mostly interested in the particular experimental technology sort of things that CRKT has been doing. This guy, like I said, there is a much better alternative that has kind of the same cutting profile there, even though the top of the blade is shaped a little bit different and just implemented a little bit better as far as I think. We got the Vosteed Morel, which is interesting, but probably not quite as good as the RS Chaos or whatever they renamed it to. And then we got the CJRB Resource here, which, if you like a big knife, this thing will put a smile on your face. Maybe almost kind of reminds me a bit of like a poor man's Cold Steel 4MAX or something like that. But yeah, just some interesting knives. Some were kind of mediocre, but a couple of them were pretty good. Alrighty, yep, this went on way too dang long, unfortunately. But we'll go ahead and cut it here. I'll just try my best into cutting back on the length just a little bit. But, you know, in the meantime, I'm happy with this here. So, as always, appreciate y'all for watching. Have yourself a wonderful rest of your day, yo. And like, comment, and subscribe if you made it this far in the video and you actually feel like doing so. Yeah, after that, I'll catch y'all in the next one.